It's a far cry from sparkling downtown Beirut, where Mercedes and Hummers wait for valet parking. But Tariq El Jadidi is Abu Ali's turf. Abu Ali is quick to offer coffee. He holds court in this small cafe. People stop to greet him, shaking hands and kissing cheeks. Everyone here knows Abu Ali, and that helped Hassan when he came here 2 weeks ago. This is where Abu Ali brokers his deals, on cheap plastic chairs, sipping sweet Turkish coffee. On this evening, Hassan sits next to Abu Ali and listens as the man describes his business.
I've
sold maybe 25 kidneys, 26, all Syrian.
Hassan lifts up his new t-shirt and shows me a large bandage on the left side of his abdomen. Abu Ali is a general sim broker. Arms, drugs, and now organs.
Joan, do you want to talk about which of those clips was yours, first of all, and why you chose it?
Sure. I chose the clip. Mine is the one with Rebecca Collard and the Syrian. It was about Syrian, the organ broker. And I chose that one because, for me, that's very, very much a current story. It's a good story. It's a good documentary. Because it's very much rooted to me in the day in which, we're looking at, all these, we're hearing all these stories about Syrians fleeing to Lebanon and the desperation. And, when I talked to Rebecca, we were talking about how do you illustrate that and how do you show that desperation? And we talked about a bunch of stuff, and one of the things that we'd originally talked about is, finding you also heard about a lot of orphans going across the border. And so, could we find like a young orphan, or what could we do? Anyway, ultimately, she said, look, I've heard this story about, organs being sold on the black market. Syrians so desperate, they're selling not only their kidneys, but, at that point she hadn't heard, but ultimately she found out that there was a guy who sold his cornea for money. And it's, to me, so it was just a demonstration of what I think is the kind of stories that really elevate something that's going on in the world to something very human, and it instantly demonstrates to me the desperation. It's also, I don't want to go on and on, we don't have a lot of time, but to me, it's that interesting gray area that we all exist in, most people. It's not good or bad or evil, or it's interestingly, I chose that clip in part because the broker, I loved some of the writing there with the idea that he brokers his deals on cheap plastic chairs. And right away, too, this guy's not the high-flying guy that he wants to protect. He's a kind of a loser who's desperate himself. And he's not high in the totem. He doesn't even know where the organs go. So I think in that clip, I was trying to just demonstrate to me what hits all of the marks, and it was original. I hadn't heard that story. I mean, we've heard a lot about organs being sold, certainly, but in terms of specifically the Syrians that are fleeing there, desperate, can't get work, and that's what they're left with, these kind of choices. And that they actually thought, the one guy anyway, to a degree, felt that this organ broker was helping him, and the organ broker really, truly, I think, believes that not only is he making money, he's also helping people.
So, Joan, there's a couple of things you said in that I'm wondering if you can expand upon when it comes to what is a story for you on the current that deserves documentary treatment. You talked about of the day, you talked about character, you talked about a kind of gray moral ground that is an interesting territory to explore. What marks for you a story as a story for the current?
Well, like you said, I mean, the thing is, when I say there's certain benchmarks, and we obviously current is one of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be happening right now. And if we don't do it now, we're totally, we've lost it. It means something that it's either there's something going on in the world, in the news, in the zeitgeist that makes what we're trying to get at a story. It's a microcosm. I'm looking for human stories that are a microcosm that really illustrates what we're really talking about. So often there's so much buzz and news, talk about things in the abstract, and when you get right down to it, we don't really, I think, always get what it really, the deeper meaning, I suppose, right? So I'm looking for stories that have some like stakes, obviously high stakes, but also have a deeper meaning. And like for example, one of the stories that we did, I think it was about a year and a half ago, I talked with a freelancer I really like in Baltimore, and it was not long after the Newtown Sandy Hook school shootings, and there was so much debate over, again, in the states of gun control, and so much of that comes down to the argument that, you know, people need guns to protect themselves, and it's a series, you know, it's the right to, and you need it. So anyway, we're trying to, you know, how do you get something new when everything seems to be, you know, being debated? And then we talked, and we said, you know, one of the things that would be really interesting is to get an expert who knows what it means to shoot self-defense. And by expert, I mean someone who's lived it, breathed it, a human, a real person who, you know what, they're not part of the debate, they're not political, they're living it. So we both thought, oh yeah, that's great, and Sarah Richards ran off and talked to a million different people. So that's the other thing, she had to find the right person, and we often talk in characters, and forgive me because I do all the time, but they're, you know, I hate to, you know, they're real people with a real story. She found this guy who had shot a man in his house in self-defense. Somebody had broken in. He had this gun that was more ornamental than anything, and the trauma that guy and the description that guy had about what that meant. Realistically, that's what we wanted to get at. What does it really mean? Because even law enforcement, they'll say if they shoot someone, it's traumatic for someone who's a professional, let alone just a regular person. So what was fascinating about that story, it brought sort of a deeper meaning about sort of what it means, and for somebody who's a regular person, it changed his life. And on the one hand, he felt it was the right thing to do. On the other hand, it was, he's not going to be the same. It was traumatic. So anyway, I'm sort of blathering on, probably taking up more than my 5 minutes, but to me, that is another kind of illustration of the kind of stories that bring some deeper meaning to discussion or debate that's happening sort of in a wider, more general way.
So quick question, and I already know the answer, but just in case anybody doesn't, your stories don't have to be international, right?
Oh, absolutely not, absolutely not. And very quickly, like there's lots of great Canadian examples, and sometimes you hear a premise and you think, oh God, that's like bang, that's amazing. Like the story we had about a woman who'd had an affair with a priest for 30 years. All this, the backdrop is, you know, will this pope change the rules around celibacy? So that's another international, but certainly there's another one, like for just off the top of my head, Ellen Sanger, who used to work with us, she did a story about a young girl who was going to have to care, suddenly, she's going to high school, she suddenly had to care for her mother who was struck suddenly with MS, debilitating MS. And that was a fascinating story because the backdrop, the current thing with that was that this is going on. There was a study that more and more kids are having to care for their parents.
Right.
This is an example of that. She, it was her struggle trying to make friends in school, but doing everything at home, and her mom terrified that her children were going to be taken away from her by social services if they found out what was going on. So she couldn't call for more help. Anyway, sorry, I'm blathering, but
You're blathering, darling. I'm going to turn the blather over to Greg Kelly.